Welcome back to another episode of Speaking Tongues. I'm here today with Leticia. Leticia is a dancer, a DJ, a Brazilophile, and California native based in New York City for 18 years. She has performed, choreographed, and taught samba and other styles of dance for over 12 years. Thank you so much for joining me today, Leticia.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And I just want to get this out of the way for people who are listening. You were my dance teacher.
Yeah.
You were my dance teacher. You were my first samba teacher.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I learned the basics of samba from you, to which I am forever grateful. And
Yay. I'm so happy to hear that. I feel
yes,
so honored.
yes, absolutely. I have a like you, but I'm far behind you. But I am also such a lover of Brazilian culture and music and everything Brazilian. Like I just love it. So I'm glad that we're gonna have this chat today. And I'm glad that you introduced me to samba in the first place, like my musical love. So
Me too. That is so awesome. I'm so
yeah.
glad I was the one to introduce you.
Yes, you always have a place in my heart for that.
Yay.
I like to start each episode with the same question, which is, what is your first language and which languages have you learned to speak?
Okay, so this might be a weird answer, but so I'm told by my parents that I spoke Spanish when I was very, very little. So I guess I would say Spanish and English. If you could
Okay.
say both, I don't know if that works.
Yeah.
In my world, I feel like it makes sense.
Hmm.
And then when I was, when I went off to start school, kindergarten, that's when English like really, really just took over. But
Hmm.
I always had Spanish in the house because of my parents and especially my mom, who's from El Salvador.
Oh, okay.
Um, and then later, in college is when I started to learn Portuguese formally, like taking classes. But I really started to hear the language more because I got into the music when I was like around 15 or 16.
Yeah.
So I was, I guess, like developing my ear for it from that
That's so
time.
cool. What drew you to the music? What drew you to the language?
There was actually this a capoeira presentation at my school when I was in high school. Like
Hmm.
this, somebody brought in this like capoeira group and like there was this assembly or something about it. Or I don't know if it was exactly about capoeira or how they, kind of presented it,
Hmm.
but capoeira was part of it. And that was my first time seeing it and um hearing like the music that goes with capoeira. And it may or may not have been my first time ever hearing Brazilian Portuguese,
Hmm.
but for some reason on that day, like after the presentation had finished, I was, of course, intrigued by the whole thing, the movement, the music, the singing, and sort of like chanting.
Hmm.
But afterwards, I heard them speaking amongst themselves, like the Capoeira people in Portuguese. And I was just zoned into that. Like I could hear it was like one of those moments in the movies where like you hear nothing else but that sound. And I was just so intrigued because it sounded so different
Hmm.
than anything I'd ever heard. But yeah, I guess just that. It was just so, it sounded so different. I really liked the rhythm and just the sounds, where
Hmm.
some of them were like kind of funny and I was like, what are you doing? Like, so yeah, and just being kind of like always having a musical ear and like being a musician and having um like a music training from when I was little, I think
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
always so intrigued by sounds.
The musical ear is so in tuned in ways that us non-musical folk can't really pick up. So like you like being
Mm.
trained in music, like this is so random. Okay, so last night I watched the new Godzilla movie and it's all in Japanese. And
Oh.
I don't understand a word of Japanese, right? But I'm listening to it and it reminded me like the cadence of Japanese speech. I found it so interesting. And again, like I'm not a musical person, but I imagine that as a musical person, as you're listening to a language, like the cadence is one of those things that you would maybe pick up on first. Like, would you say? Or
Absolutely. 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 Now that you say it, I kind of notice I have that awareness now that I do that,
Mhm.
that's one of the things that stands out to me. Like I would call it cadence is definitely like a great word for it. I would call it like the rhythm. That's how I kind of think of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's so fascinating. That's
Yeah.
definitely That is totally one of the things that stands out to me with
Yeah.
Portuguese and all any language. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think in the case of like, well, capoeira, especially, like it's very rhythmic and it's very percussion like
Yeah.
oriented, right? So I think it's interesting that that kind of follows, or maybe what do you think? Like, do you think that the rhythm of spoken Portuguese follows that rhythm of like the capoeira and the rhythm of the movement or the rhythm of the percussion?
That's so interesting. That just made me think of like 50 other things.
Tell me, tell me.
Maybe not 50, but it made me think of something really interesting that I read recently. But yeah, I think it absolutely is all connected. Um, and I think on one level, it's really interesting to think of how that, like how sound affects our movement as human beings and like kind of our pace
Yeah.
and our like the way how fast we might walk or
Hmm.
how fast our actions we do things like on a day-to-day basis, like
Yeah.
how fast I am when I wash the dishes or like
Yeah,
kind of
right?
like how my manners, my mannerism and my movements. Yes. And that made me think of um this this quote by the Brazilian photographer Sebastião Salgado. Is that
Hmm.
his name? Really like famous and like kind of well-known photographer. He has this he had this quote in a photography book that said something about Brazilians. He said he feels really connected to Africa and kind of Brazilian culture is a lot more connected to Africa because of this idea of the continents having been connected, like Africa and
Mm,
South America actually having been connected,
like
like,
geographically, yeah.
yeah, a long time ago.
Hmm.
And I just thought that was so interesting.
Hmm.
And that makes me think of what you're saying, like how, the sound, the music, how that rhythm and the rhythm of the language could affect, you
Yeah.
know, everything, just the way that you
Yeah.
move, the cadence, how fast or slow you speak, etc. And that opposed to like Brazilian Portuguese as opposed to Portugal,
Hmm.
continental Portuguese, which is a
Yeah.
totally different
It
thing.
sounds so different to me as a non-speaker. It's like two different languages. I don't want to get slaughtered on this show, but it's like
Yeah, I agree with you. When I first started hearing Portuguese from Portugal, it sounded like a foreign language to me. It almost like
mm,
sounded like German or something. It was just like more difficult to hear.
yeah, I could hear that. I could hear that. Yeah. Tell me about, the first times that you're getting to um learn Brazilian Portuguese, learn the language, and the first times that you're getting exposure to the language. And what was that like? Like how did you how did you make that decision that you wanted to learn the language, and how was it like coming to the language for the first time?
It's a cool question. It's making me reflect. I think I just, from that first time hearing it at that school assembly, I just needed more.
Mm.
That's how it felt to me. I just felt like I always needed to hear more. I always wanted to hear more. So I was like, I need this music in my life. It was just I needed more. I always needed more. And I guess it's partly I just have this personality thing where I get kind of obsessive about things.
So do
I get
I.
very, oh gosh, I get
Hmm.
very obsessive. It's just like,
You
I
fall
want to do this
in.
all day
Yeah,
long. Yeah,
yeah,
all
yeah,
the time,
yeah.
every day, like 24 hours a day. So it became kind of like that to me. It was
Yeah,
always like, oh, and it was always like, oh, have you guys heard this? Oh my God, this is so good. Or like,
right.
so I was always going to like the record store, the music store, and like buying CDs, buying compilations of Brazilian music, which was like a lot of bossa nova and
Mm,
MPB and like, the major names that I think most people who have any interest at all in like
hmm.
music or Brazilian music get into, like,
Yeah.
Gal Costa, Caetano Veloso, Gilberto Gil, like all these people.
Hmm.
So it was like collecting music.
Right.
I consider that like my first learning of the language informally. I guess just continuing down that rabbit hole of the music and then always just finding things to read about Brazil or like what
Hmm.
was happening there and delving a little bit more to find out more about the genres of music that exist come from there, and finding out, reading about artists and like history. So when it was time to choose a college, by that time I knew I wanted to visit Brazil for sure.
Right.
So I kind of based my college search on that. It was like,
That's
who's gonna,
awesome.
yeah, it's like, who's gonna let me study abroad in Brazil once I
Yeah.
found out that that was like, an option. So I chose my school based on that. And I think, I don't remember if before I went, if I started doing like language courses.
Hmm.
I remember after, during, while I was there, I definitely had coursework on language. And I lived with a Portuguese speaking family. So I was like forced, by immersion to practice and learn.
Oh,
And then when I
wow.
came back
Hmm.
um, to the States, I kept taking coursework in college.
So you went to Brazil with like no Portuguese or like a
I
little
had
bit of
like
Portuguese?
a little, no classes, no formal classes,
Gosh. Okay.
just like what I'd heard in the music.
Oh,
And then
wow.
also I started to read it.
Yeah.
But of course, that's, it's
Hmm.
so different
Oh my
when,
gosh.
trying to speak something and getting that, like the
Mhm.
A till is like, you know,
That reminds me when I was in high school and I convinced myself that I wanted to go to Brazil and stay there for the rest of my life. And and I wanted everything Brazilian. And
yes.
this was in the late 90s. So like I had no access to even finding a class or, we didn't have the internet like that in the late 90s, like
Yeah, it wasn't the same.
99. Yeah. So I remember going to the library and checking out books like, Brazilian Portuguese for Dummies or like Teach Yourself Portuguese
Oh, ooh,
and
that's
stuff.
brilliant.
And then I would take a piece of paper and I would write down like, the numbers, the colors, and like how to
Oh.
say like good morning, good night, I'm sorry, excuse me. The basics, right? But I didn't have an inkling of the pronunciation. So all I had was like words on a paper. And it was just and I look back on it now, like 24, 25 years later, and I'm like, where did I think I was going? Like, because I feel like
That is so fascinating to me, like that you took that approach. I think it's so cool because that totally didn't occur to me.
really?
It's like, yeah, I was just obsessed with the music. I was like, let me hear more of this, please. Like,
Yeah. But maybe because you have musical training and you have a musical ear, maybe you could pick it up just from listening to, Gilberto Gil, or, you could pick up the pronunciation. And me, I was like, wow, they're speaking so fast. I don't even know like what
hmm.
I can't even make out the words, but I
Oh,
do
this is
remember,
so fascinating
yeah,
from like a
yeah,
learning perspective, like
right, right.
that the visual and then can how does our brain make that connection of like the visual and the auditory?
Yeah, and you think about words even in, in your native language that you've only ever seen written and you don't know how to pronounce it, and then like you
Oh
go
yeah.
to someone and they're like, "Wait, like what are you?" That's not
What are
how
you
it's
saying?
said. Right, right. But like it wasn't until years later, I can't even remember what word it was, but I was like, shoot, I've been pronouncing this wrong in this Portuguese word, pronouncing it wrong my whole life because I never heard it spoken. So I didn't know.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're in Brazil, you have a host family, and you've got your musical ear as your superpower. What was that experience like? Like just kind of being 100% fully immersed in the language and, you know, hopefully having supportive people around you. But what was that experience like?
It was fascinating. It was fun. It was interesting. It was somewhat, in hindsight, I would say it was almost chaotic from like a sensory perspective
Mm,
because you're just getting hit with so much stuff. It's new. It's like the climate. It's hot and
mm,
humid. What is going on? Like what people are moving slow, like so slowly here. People are like, it was just, the way that society is organized is different in the cities and the way people are driving and the cars and then this and then that. It was just like, there's so much new stuff.
yeah.
And it was just so like stimulating too, and just like just so fascinating. I would just my ear would just zoom in into, whenever somebody was speaking or there was like an announcement in a store or
Mm,
it's just like,
mm-hmm,
oh wow, to hear. Obviously it's different in music versus the spoken language, and just
mm-hmm.
like, every day talking to someone or introducing yourself, or
Right.
in an interaction like in a school setting.
Mm-hmm.
So that was also fascinating too, to like get used to that and just notice the differences.
Yeah.
So I think for me, my how it felt for me and my experience is very much that, like, kind of there's this like comparison sort of against how I heard things in the music kind of always,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I would imagine so because it's like also with music, I think that you get used to the repetition because you can play the song over and over again. And then just
Totally.
kind of like in real life, you're like, oh wait, they're not repeating.
Oh wait, this isn't a musical. This is not a song. Yeah, and you know what? It's really cool. It was cool to have moments where I would recognize, I could understand, I could piece things together. I started to have like another level of comprehension, like a
Mhm,
deeper level of comprehension. I'm
mhm.
like, oh, I know that word from this song. I
Yeah.
know. And then understanding songs better because I was getting more, education in the language and
Hmm.
practicing it more and understanding everything better, like
Yeah.
actually understanding vocabulary and like grammar
Hmm.
and stuff.
Hmm.
So that was really fun too. And then it was really fun to connect the dots on like cultural context things that I'd heard in music, and also like history
Mm.
stuff that I would hear in the music from like the sambas, like the carnival sambas, where they talk a lot about Brazilian history and culture and stuff. So that
Hmm.
was pretty fascinating too.
Yeah. I think that would probably, I imagine it would probably be really like, I don't want to like put words in your mouth, but like if it were me, for me, I feel like it would be really groundbreaking because like I don't even remember hearing about Brazilian history, specifically Black history, when it comes to
Mm,
Brazil and how, like, I didn't learn about any of that until I was much older. And then, like, listening to so much of the music and discovering, like, more Black Brazilian musicians and stuff and realizing, like, oh, like, this is an issue for them too, you know? And I
yeah.
feel like it just for me it just like opened up such a whole new world of understanding like or trying to understand because I have yet to visit Brazil. I don't know what I'm I know, I
You
know.
haven't been there? Oh my God.
I know.
You will totally love it. It'll be like such a moment in your life. You go.
I'm
You're
excited.
probably gonna stay.
I know, I know.
Yeah,
I got to do this. But
go
I'm just
for
kind of
it.
like I might only have like 6 days and I'm like, no, this has been a lifetime ambition. I can't go for 6 days. I need like weeks, you
You need a
know?
month at least. Yeah.
Thank you for validating me.
Yes, absolutely. Anytime. Oh my
um
goodness.
I
Yeah.
know. I know. I feel like well, this is another conversation, but I just feel like I would not want to leave. So
Yeah.
I'm excited, but I'm also scared because I'm like, how will I call my mom and be like, I'm not coming, I'm not coming back. You have to
That's
come
funny.
here. When you were there, were you in a big city or a smaller city?
I got to experience a couple of different
Okay.
cities, and some of them were big, some of them were tiny,
Hmm.
small, like very rural,
Oh
like
wow.
villages.
Yeah.
So I got to experience Rio, Salvador, Fortaleza. My study abroad was mostly in Fortaleza,
Hmm.
which is a large city. Um, and then I spent like a couple weeks in Salvador, and I think we did some like a few little day trips out to smaller towns
Right.
there.
Hmm.
And I did a few weeks, or maybe it was more like a month. I did like there was like an independent study portion
Hmm.
of the trip, and that's when I got to be in this little a fishing village, like a traditional fishing village in the Northeast.
Oh my God.
And it was very, yeah, it was like, maybe hundreds of people. Everybody knows everyone, and they still, live off fishing the old school way on these tiny little
Wow.
boats.
Hmm.
It was something. It was like very fascinating,
That's
very
a
different.
that's a really wonderful experience. Oh
It
my
was cool. It
goodness.
was like so unique.
Yeah. So as well, in the times you've been to Brazil, because I don't want to just pin you into this initial experience, but um, and you're learning the language through immersion, which I completely applaud you doing that. I think
Thank
that's
you.
like such a feat. Um, how did you notice at all like the language changing as you moved through the country? Were there words that or phrases you were able to use in certain places, and then you go south or north or to a different metropolis, and they were like, "What are you saying?" or "What?"
Yeah, you know what? Now that I haven't reflected on that in a long time, honestly, the time that I spent the longest in Brazil was during that study abroad trip,
Mm,
so like 3 or 4 months. So yeah, a lot. And I've been there once since for like a week.
okay.
So yeah, most of my experience is, being in the country was during that time.
Hmm.
But yeah, I remember there being probably like slang. I remember slang being different, like Rio versus the Northeast,
Mm.
big difference in accent also.
Yeah, tell me about that.
And the cadence, the pace. Like in the
Hmm.
Northeast, they speak a lot more slowly.
Hmm.
And there's in Rio, they speak faster. And I remember there being how would I describe it? It feels like they cut their words off like a little shorter because of their accent in
Mm.
the Northeast.
Okay.
So that was interesting and like kind of hard to hear at first. Like I couldn't make it out what they were saying. Yeah, and there are definitely phrases. I'm trying to think of an example. Phrases like colloquialisms and even that are different, and even there are probably words that are just not used at all,
Hmm.
region
Right.
compared to a different region because of
Hmm.
culture and geography and stuff like that.
Yeah. In all of this, where does dance come into play for you?
Oh, yeah. So, chronologically speaking, while on that study abroad trip, we got to do some dancing, um, and we got to see some dancing actually. So it was actually not the dancing that we did was like pretty informal, and it was more like, for fun, or it was like this option that you could have as part of your day
Hmm.
during like some day trips that we had. I remember in Salvador, we stopped by, I don't know if someone was like, these locals were like giving a class or something. It was like a dance fitness type of a
Oh,
thing or
cool.
something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was really fun and cool. And also, maybe was it also in Salvador at the college, or maybe it was one of the colleges or universities that we were visiting that was like, like a sister school or something, or like a partner to this program that we were on.
Hmm.
We saw this performance by some of the dance students there. So it was like not traditional Brazilian or like folkloric Brazilian dance. It was like probably more like contemporary modern dance type of
Oh,
a thing, which was
okay.
really fascinating. Um, and then but dance was not like the focus, or music or art was not the focus of my studies on
Hmm.
that study abroad program. It was like more studying culture and like sustainable development. It was
Yeah.
like, a totally different thing.
Hmm.
But so when I came back, when I moved to New York City, actually, after graduating from college, I got into the world of Brazilian music and dance like pretty soon after I moved to the city in 2005.
Hmm.
I somehow fell in with like all these Brazilian musicians. Actually, there was some like event happening at the YWCA downtown Brooklyn,
Okay.
and like Brazilian music, this Brazilian group was part of it. And it was like a drum, like a percussion ensemble.
Hmm.
And that actually started like my whole trajectory on like Brazilian dance and music and
Yeah.
culture in New York City, and like my whole like career doing that. So I started out actually taking classes with them,
Hmm.
studying percussion and like learning how to play all the drums and learning how to be part of like a samba ensemble. So during that time, I just got more and more immersed, more and more involved. It's like as you easily could get sucked in. So I started performing with them. I started taking dance classes. I ended up partnering with the leader of this band, this group, and we started a company together and Samba Nation Productions. And we were doing like shows, and I was that during that time is when I started teaching samba dance classes for different studios throughout the city. And then I
Hmm.
was also performing, like doing shows and, like parties and American Museum of Natural History and
What?
a
That's
range of things. Yeah,
amazing.
so it was like a total range of things, like from that type of a thing where it's like a presentation to the public to like parties for like somebody's wedding and they want samba dancers. So yeah, it's like I had these, a range of experiences as a performer. And
Hmm.
during that time I was also getting more serious about dancing and just like, studying other genres and
Yeah.
other forms. And
Hmm.
I started working as a teaching artist, teaching ballroom dance. So I learned, yeah, I did that for like 7 years,
Oh, wow.
all over New York City schools, public schools, charter schools, private schools,
Hmm.
and just like different. Samba was not part of their curriculum. It was like salsa, foxtrot, tango, swing, waltz, stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's really cool. That's
Yeah, it
really,
was
really
like,
cool.
yeah, it was just, I loved dancing so much. I was like, I just want to do more. It was that same kind of like obsessive energy.
Yeah.
And then it just turned into like, a career, I guess.
Yeah, that's the reason people come to New York. Like that's the story that
Absolutely.
people come
Yeah.
here and thrive. And I love to hear it. I think that's amazing.
Yay. Thanks. Yeah.
If you enjoyed this episode of Speaking Tongues, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the Speaking Tongues podcast on Apple Podcasts, and like and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube so that other language lovers like ourselves can find the show. If you've been a longtime listener of the show or even a recent listener, you can now pledge ongoing support for the show on buymeacoffee.com or on patreon.com. Samba, we're talking about samba, is now I know, but for our listeners, there are different types of samba, right?
Absolutely. Musically and in the dance.
Okay, can you
Rhythmically. Yeah.
walk us through that a bit?
Yeah. So I'm like, where should I start? There's Carnival. Maybe people tend to be familiar with seeing Carnival
Yeah, it's a good
on TV and
touchstone.
in media everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So um the genre of dance, like when you say samba to a Brazilian, they're probably going to think you could be referring to the music,
Mm-hmm.
you could be referring to the rhythm, you could be referring to the dance
Okay.
and the dance step.
Right.
Um, I don't know if I'm like going off on a tangent here, but I just feel like this is a good way to frame it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just so carnival, quote unquote carnival samba, you might like people sometimes might refer to it as that just to make it easy to differentiate. So the genre of music that goes with that, it's fast,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like party time out in the streets and it's like, like what is that? 130 or plus BPMs. Maybe I'm getting too technical there. That's samba enredo.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's like that genre or like subgenre of samba.
Okay.
And the lyrics are often about like some, it could be like a historical topic or like some cultural kind of a topic that goes with the whole samba parade.
Yeah.
And then you have samba, let's say there's samba reggae, like samba reggae,
Mm-hmm.
different rhythm, like a lot slower,
Yeah.
um, has like a different kind of swing.
Mm-hmm.
And the dance moves that go with that are totally different too.
Yeah.
It's like you might think of it like when you see it, it kind of has like a more Afro kind of vibe
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Samba, you could say Partido Alto, which is another, Partido Alto is a rhythm, like technically
It's
speaking.
my favorite.
Yeah, that's like the type of samba that I had been looking for since I was a teenager.
Hmm.
Because I knew it was there. I knew it was out there. I
Yeah.
didn't know what it was called.
Right. Right.
Um, so yeah, and that's like the pace or rhythmically, I don't know if you could put it in the middle. It's faster than samba hegi,
Hmm.
but not necessarily as fast as samba enredo. And actually some of the, I don't know, Partido Alto is like a different scene,
Hmm.
right? It's like you'll it's people in like someone's backyard having like a house party and like gathered around a table with like, the beer and
Yeah.
caipirinhas and like food and everybody's, you have the little cavaquinhos and you have
Hmm.
certain instruments that go with it and everybody's like singing along. It's like
Right. Yeah.
that type of a community vibe feel.
It always feels to me like you said, like you got together and then someone said, "Oh, well, so and so is a really great singer." And then,
Yeah.
they're like, "Oh, sing us something, sing us something." And then they have this beautiful voice and like everyone gathers in. Like that's kind of how I imagine it, like when I hear Partido
Yeah.
Alto songs. Um,
Yeah. It's very kind of like, I guess you could call it roots samba.
mm,
I've heard it described that way, and I've talked to Brazilians, and they would say that's kind of an accurate, kind of description.
yeah,
It's very like roots and kind of, not as commercial as like the carnival stuff
right.
or showy,
Yeah.
flashy. And then there's more besides that, like samba canção, which is like ballads.
Hmm.
And I'm probably missing some more.
Yeah.
I don't think I've named them all. But those are like major.
Hmm. I love how the genre is so varied and so different throughout because even when I was first looking for a samba class to join, before I found you, a lot of the stuff I was finding was like ballroom samba and
Oh
like
yeah, yeah, yeah. There's that too.
yeah, like
Totally, which is totally different.
yeah. Um And I was watching a video, like somebody was doing like a ballroom samba thing, and they like the way that they move is just like completely different than like the
Yeah,
the Rio Carnival,
yeah.
style of samba. And it's like, man, man.
Man. Yeah, samba no pé, which
Uh-huh.
is carnival style
Yeah.
samba that you dance on your own that you
Hmm.
see. And yeah, ballroom like gafieira style samba.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's like the ballroom like competitive
Mm.
samba. That's also like a different thing too.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, like the basic step is different. The body movement is totally different.
Hmm.
The music that they use is different too. Like
Yeah. Oh.
it's really interesting.
That is, well, for a country as big as Brazil, I shouldn't be surprised that there's so much variety because duh, like
Absolutely.
it makes sense. How about some other types of Brazilian music and dance and I guess what part of the country would one be likely to hear certain or maybe some of the more popular genres or the more popular dances? Like where are we likely to see people dancing them and likely to
Hmm.
hear that style of music played or
Yeah,
performed?
that's a good
Yeah.
question. That makes me think of several things. Since we were just talking about samba, that's really big in Rio and Sao Paulo, as far as I know. And I haven't been there in years, but the biggest parades that you see like on Brazilian TV and that tourists go to, they're in Rio and in Sao Paulo, like the largest, cities in Brazil.
Hmm.
Not that there's not samba elsewhere, but those are like major, major centers. And it's like a big, commercial activity
Hmm.
there.
Yeah.
Um, and then for samba reggae and Afro style samba, Bahia, Salvador,
Mm.
like that's the heart of it, right?
Yeah.
Forró, music and dancing, the Northeast is like the origins are really in that whole region.
Hmm.
states and cities there. For partner dancing, like Gaviera,
Mm-hmm.
I think Rio may or may not have like a kind of a scene for that. I suspect that it does. Also, samba rock,
Mm.
samba rock,
Mm-hmm.
that's another genre, and that has a dance style, a partner dance style that goes with it, and
Ooh.
that has a history in Sao Paulo.
Oh, okay.
But there, not to say that there aren't scenes elsewhere,
Mm-hmm.
but there's definitely there's been a history of it in Sao Paulo, and
Mm-hmm.
that's a fun, yeah, cool genre and like style to explore.
Yeah.
That has it's kind of like there's it kind of has like a funk kind of vibe, like 70s funk from the United States kind of vibe to it, mixed with
Yeah.
samba. It's
Yeah.
like such a fun, cool, rhythm. It's
Yeah.
like Georgie Bang style of music. That's
Yes.
totally samba hawk.
Yes. That's the best way to describe it. Yeah. Yeah. I like claw at like all this music and I put it all on one
Yeah.
playlist, but then I
Yeah.
forget that there's so many different genres in there and like
Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
yeah. The playlist is probably like 1,000 songs at this point. Like pretty much
Wow.
if it has Brazilian lyrics, I've dropped it in the playlist, and then I'm
Yeah.
like every
Oh,
now
I
and
would
then I'm
love to
like, wait a
see. I would
minute.
love to see what you collected.
I'll send it to you. It's on
Cool.
Spotify. So okay, so we talked about dance, and then I know that in the Brazilian like the musicians, like there's so many instruments, and they're all like it's percussion heavy. Would you agree? Like
Yeah, absolutely.
how do you well, we talked about this a little bit, but like the connection between the dancer and the musician in 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 Brazilian music seems like it's like peanut butter and jelly. Like they just go together and they're perfect. How
Yeah.
how has like what's your connection been like with the percussionist, and knowing that you have a musical background, like are there instruments that you've picked up and you've learned to play, and what are some of those? Do you have any favorites? Like tell us all of that.
Oh, yes. I love to talk about this. Well, I didn't start out as a dancer. I started out as a percussionist.
Mm,
So I learned how to play surdo, like all three of them. Sometimes there's more, but there's
mhm,
usually one, two, and three for basics for starters. I learned how to play caixa, which is like a snare drum,
mhm,
a little bit of tambourine. I'm not the best at tambourine, like little handheld percussion instrument. I got the basics of Hepiniki, which is like the leader that calls all the other drums. This is as far as a samba drum ensemble. So I learned like the basics of Hepiniki, but that's not my forte by any means.
mhm.
And definitely like all the light percussion for sure, like agogo, which is the bell, shaker, definitely. Like little handheld shaker, and also like the larger one that you hold with two hands for the samba schools. Oh, so
Whoa.
much fun. Yeah, so loud, so
Mhm.
fun.
I'm really enjoying this conversation. I just want you to know
Yay.
because this
Me
is like,
too.
do you feel like there's anything that dance and, Brazilian dance and Brazilian percussion, Brazilian music expresses about Brazilian culture and history and people that you feel like the language cannot express?
That's an interesting question. I guess I would say just the joy. Yeah, just the music does it in a way, in a special way. The
Hmm.
music and the dance does it in a even more visceral way. It's just, yeah, the joy, the unashamed, like there's an attitude that I really like in Brazil where it's like you should be unashamed to feel joy.
Mm.
It's okay to be this joyful. It's okay
Yeah,
to feel this happy and just regardless of whatever's going on, no matter what, it's like we're going to be happy anyway,
yeah.
even if, whatever. Even if
Hmm.
there's COVID, even if I have no money this week,
Right.
even if we don't like our president, like even if whatever, there's
Hmm.
just this, like there's no fear to be happy.
Right.
And I think that's what the music brings out. That's what the music expresses very
Yeah.
much. Like
Yeah.
just the ultimate, like the highest joy.
That's so interesting that you say that because as you're saying that, and I'm thinking of the songs that I love and the songs I've had on repeat for months, like when I start listening to that playlist, I just feel sometimes it's this much better. Sometimes it's a lot
Yes.
better, but it's usually like there's something that perks up in me, and it's like
Yeah.
it could be a sad song, or like the subject matter could be sad because I look up the lyrics and I see, not because I know, but like I think that I would agree with that. Like there's just something, there's this undertone of just like I deserve to be happy. Like joy is a
Yeah.
human right. And
Yes. Yes. Joy is
right,
a human right. I
right.
love that.
Yeah.
Totally.
So you're in the States and you haven't been to Brazil in a while, you said. Like, what are some ways, I mean, other than the music, I guess, but like, what are some ways that you stay connected to the culture, that you stay connected to your time in Brazil? Is it through friends or maybe through literature or food, maybe?
Yeah, sometimes with food. Definitely like a lot of the colleagues and associates and friends that I've made like on the scene of music making and like Brazilian culture. Definitely keeping in touch with them. The music for sure. I try to keep my, oh, this is a good time to talk my blog.
Yes.
My blog isn't that updated, but like the calendar of Brazilian events that are happening in the
Mm-hmm.
city,
Right.
that's totally a way I try to keep in touch through my newsletter too.
Yeah.
That's like chatting to other people who are also Brazilophiles or,
Mm-hmm.
like to hear about what's happening in like the music and culture, want to keep up with like my dance activities.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I try to keep up with just find thing like kind of curate things that I like or that I think people would find interesting as far as artists or music or like events that are happening in the city and kind of around the world too.
Mm-hmm.
Just like keep my keep things on my radar. And then I've been visiting Portugal a little bit lately, like
Oh, cool.
2021 I was there. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
in 2016 that was my first visit there. So
What was
that
that
was just
like?
it was so wonderful. I absolutely loved it. It
Portugal's
was
great.
amazing.
Yeah.
It was so cool.
Hmm. Yeah. What was it like communicating in Portugal uh when you did go
It
there?
was interesting. I was, they were pretty much understanding me, like, even though, even by that time, like, my Portuguese is like not great at all because I don't practice it that much anymore.
Oh, okay.
So I guess I still tried to use it a little bit, and I think people understood me, but I was having a hard time understanding them because I think it was really my first time hearing, European continental
Yeah.
Portuguese. And it was just
Hmm.
like, it was hard to hear. It was like, wait, it was like, it took me a while to process and
Right.
just to decipher the sounds and the languages.
You mentioned your blog and you mentioned your newsletter, and I want to give you a chance to tell people more about that. Maybe how you got started. Of course, tell us the name of it, and most
Yeah.
importantly, tell us where we can find you.
Yeah. So I got the domain name areyoubrazilian.com because people would always ask me that because they
Yeah.
saw me, like performing and doing
Mm-hmm.
samba and like always just on the Brazilian scene, like
Mm-hmm.
everywhere in New York City. They're like, it was just a question that I got so much. I was like, you know what? That's my brand, kind of.
Yeah.
Like,
Own
yeah,
it.
that is my brand. So boom, yeah. It just made sense. Areyoubrazilian.com.
Hmm.
So that my blog is there. And you can sign up for my email newsletter there. And I'm Are You Brazilian on Instagram. And I guess I'm like a little sporadic on Instagram. It's not the greatest, cutest Instagram, guys, just to let you know. But I try to keep it up a little bit. If there's something, like really interesting, I repost things, events that are happening or like really great images,
Hmm.
like from Brazil or like parts of
Yeah.
Brazilian culture. And I emphasize Afro-Brazilian culture a lot too.
I will add links to those in the show notes for this episode so that people who are
Awesome.
looking for you can click and find you right away. I know you're also a DJ,
Yes.
and now it makes so much sense because you're like a musical person and you probably have the best playlists ever.
Thank
Um,
you. Oh, I have that linked up somewhere in my on those two, like on
oh,
my blog and
cool.
on my Instagram. There's a playlist on
Awesome.
Spotify.
Tell us about DJing. Like what kind of music do you play and where do you play and
Yeah, so I haven't been playing out anywhere in person lately.
mm-hmm.
I've been doing more live streams and hopefully
Oh,
I'll get back on doing that regularly. But I live stream on Twitch usually.
mm-hmm.
And I play more than Brazilian music. I go all over. I go kind of, I'm, I guess the genres that I tend to play a lot recently are like piano, Afro house, soulful house. Um, I always have a love for boom bap, like Jay Dilla inspired
Mm-hmm.
boom bap, especially like instrumental stuff
Yeah.
and old school 90s hip hop. Like 90s are a point of reference for me.
Yep.
Um, Alternative R&B. I do play old and new stuff, but I really like new stuff. I really like to discover new artists and genres. And, I'm really into, like, if you hear me play, you'll probably just notice that I'm very into rhythm and like grooves.
So,
Yeah, I really love Kuduro from
mm-hmm.
and the Afro Portuguese scene has been a huge passion for me over the last several, like 7, 8 years. Just like getting into those artists and
Yeah.
that rhythm has been, oh, that's like a huge obsession for me too.
Ah,
So
that's
you'll
awesome.
definitely hear Kuduro when I play. Definitely.
Where can we listen? Where can we see your stream? You said you're on Twitch. What's your
Twitch. Yeah, my DJ name is DJ Letty Love.
Yes.
Lety. Yeah, so you'll find DJ Letty Love on Twitch, and my other Instagram account, my DJ Instagram account is that DJ Letty Love.
Okay.
So you can tune into that too.
One more musical question for you because I can't resist. And you may not have answers to this because there's, you know, a lot to choose from. But like who are some of your favorites to not only listen to, but to play or to dance to? Like in the samba genre, like do you have any
Oh,
favorite
great
artists or yeah.
question. Such a good question. Oh my God. You'll probably find me throwing in Carlinhos Brown. I'm thinking of some stuff that I used to play, like probably when you took class with me like years ago. This is
Mhm.
like older stuff, like
I
Terra
remember
Samba.
you played a lot of like Say George.
I like Seu Jorge. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. He always has like some great, I don't know what he's doing lately, but I also like Vor, Vhoor.
Huh.
He's a newer guy.
Okay.
Um, he's a producer and DJ, and he uses a lot of like different Brazilian rhythms and kind of melds them with contemporary
Yeah.
or other genres.
Hmm.
And he does some cool stuff that I've used. He should be on my playlist. You'll definitely
Okay.
see Vor on my playlist. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. I think it's Abase,
Mhm.
Abase. There might be
Okay.
some accents in there, but he's on my playlist too, on that
Okay.
Spotify playlist, the Are You Brazilian playlist.
Okay. Hopefully people will feel the love from this episode towards Brazilian
Yes,
music. So I wanted to just give
totally.
them like a place to start because I felt like when I got started listening to Brazilian music, I got really stuck with like back in the days of CDs. Um it was
Yes,
oh my goodness, I can't even think Jobim. It was
totally.
Astro
Absolutely.
Gilberto, the Stan Getz, like,
Gets Gilberto. I love
yeah,
that
that
album.
one.
You like
And
jazzy, bossa nova
right,
jazzy
like
album.
very like bossa nova stuff, which is cool.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of how like like Indian music is a good example of this too, because like there's so much Indian music, there's so much music like all over India. And just like if you're not in that culture, you may think it's just like this one particular type. And then you'll go and watch like Bollywood songs or Bollywood movies, or you'll hear like this pop, and it's like, wait a minute, all this was over here and I didn't even know.
All
And that's
this.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
how I felt about Brazilian music. Just kind of like, okay, no disrespect. I love Astrid. I love Jobim, etc. But then like Betch Carvalho
Oh my
and
God, I love
and
her. Oh, my
Monica.
heart.
I know. Like oh my God,
Yes.
I love her.
Yes. Yes. When you go, when you find out that there is more than bossa nova, it's like,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. It was like someone like threw the door open, and I was like,
Yes.
oh. So it's
Yes.
yeah, yeah. And it's like I would want someone to kind of get into Brazilian music and just realize like, wait a minute, it's not just like
Yeah.
the girl from Ipanema, which is great and it's a classic, but who's the guy that I love lately? Martin,
Martinho da Vila.
yes, and his
He
daughter. It's his daughter, right?
Martinalia. Yes. Oh my
Both of
God.
them.
Yeah. Like the Zeca Pagodinho, like that whole, yeah, that whole
Yes.
like roots samba scene is
Mm-hmm.
amazing. And yeah, in Brazil it's big, right? It's
Yeah.
huge. Like you're going to concerts. Well, they do concerts all over the world too, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, for some reason it's not it's it may or may not be the first introduction that you have to
Mm-hmm.
samba or like to
Right.
Brazilian music. Like, yeah, you might have to do like a little more research, like a little more digging to get there.
Yeah, it's probably easier now than it was in 99 when I was doing it.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's really fascinating too. And then maybe depending on your on your proximity to Brazilians here in the States,
Hmm.
maybe that differs too, like how
Yeah.
you get introduced.
Yeah. And they have like a whole, well, you tell me, because you really have your finger on the pulse of the scene of Brazilian culture and music here. But there's a whole like, is it Brazil Summerfest, I think is called? Or
Yeah.
something like that, which is like a month long Brazilian culture and arts and musical celebration here in New York. Do you have any favorite places or venues or anything like that where someone who is interested or inspired by this conversation can go and experience the music and the dance and the food and the culture and all that good stuff?
Sometimes New Blue, that's a venue
Oh man, yes.
downtown in
Mm-hmm.
Manhattan. They usually do something in there. Like City Winery is another venue where they do stuff usually. And yeah, it seems like they usually will have like a couple of acts that are kind of maybe more like contemporary
Mm-hmm.
kind of artists. And they might have, I usually, it seems like they have like a final like day or maybe even going into the evening that's kind of like a DJ'd. They might have like a live performance of
Mm-hmm.
music and then have like a DJ dance party afterward with
Oh,
like a couple different DJs.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I've seen them doing that. They did that this past year, and I think they've done it for the past several years. But I think it's pretty big.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh
Like,
yeah. Oh, Miss
well,
Favela. It's like if you come to New York City, you have to go there in
mhm,
Brooklyn, right over the bridge.
yeah.
Miss Favela has music like all the time, like every weekend.
Oh, okay.
So
Every
they have live
weekend.
forró, yeah, on Sundays. They have live samba on Fridays and Saturdays, if I'm not mistaken. And it looks like they're doing other genres too. I think they had a reggae band recently.
Yeah.
Food is great, vibe is great, music is great. You can
Hmm.
dance. It's a party for sure. And it's very like, authentic, quote
Yeah.
unquote. It
Hmm.
feels like the Brazilian Boutiquim, like if you were in Brazil and you were going to like a little, place, a little bar or restaurant on the corner. Oh, Bar Goiana, Upper Harlem, East Harlem,
Oh, okay.
like in the hundreds somewhere, early in the early hundreds, like 101, 102.
Hmm.
Um, but also a Brazilian owned place, and or maybe it's like a couple, and one is Brazilian and one is something else.
Hmm.
But they're also like very, very talked about and very written about also
Oh,
on the like
cool.
food scene, or
Yeah.
I think they've gotten some kind of recognition or, you know, how they
Yeah.
do with restaurants here.
Uh-huh.
Um, and they do events like in the summer. They had like a big street party that was like
Oh,
they had
wow.
a Festa Junina, which is like a traditional Northeastern party with like
Hmm.
forró music and
Get
all the kind of
out.
traditional things that you would have at that kind of a party, like their traditional foods, a
Hmm.
lot of corn-based
Yeah, yeah.
dishes and snacks and meals.
Hmm.
Um, And I think they sometimes do live music too. So I don't know
Okay.
if they do that just in the summer, but they're totally
Oh,
active. Like find them on Insta, Bar Goyana.
I gotta check that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Me
haven't
too. I
even
haven't
heard
been
of
there
it.
yet, but it
Oh
looks
my
really good.
gosh. Ah.
Oh, and that makes me think of another one, Santo Brooklyn.
So I'm gonna
And
shout
they
I'm gonna shout out Santo Brooklyn because Sarah and her husband Pedro are
are
the
they the
owners
owners?
of, and they are listeners of this show. And
Hey, I haven't been there yet, but I want to go.
so we want to make sure we shout them out. And it's their food is delicious. Oh my
It looks
goodness.
beautiful. When I've seen it
It's
on Insta, it looks so beautiful.
You have to go. Like their food is incredible. And I went over the summer and I was like, how is everything better than the last thing? Everything was
Oh,
just better. And uh
I'm excited. Now I need to go
yes,
there.
yes, I 100% love them. They are the sweetest people. Their team is so hospitable and welcoming, and their food is amazing. So I
Oh,
100% recommend.
all the things I like to hear. Yeah, I saw
Yes.
something that they were doing that was really cool. How they did a cross. I think I talked about it in my newsletter where they talk about they made a dish that was like Senegalese and Brazilian
Mm,
inspired, or
hmm.
they did like a traditional like a chibujin, traditional Senegalese like fish and rice or
Yeah, yeah,
something,
yeah.
but Brazilian style with like some
Hmm.
Brazilian ingredients or flavors. And I thought that was so cool.
They've been doing some fusion dishes, which is like
Yeah.
so cool. And I wish I lived within delivery range sometimes because they're in Brooklyn and I'm in Queens. But
Oh, that's hard. Yeah.
I know, but they are the loveliest people and it's the loveliest restaurant. I hope you get a chance to go. Leticia, thank you so much for this conversation. I
You're
had
so welcome. Thank
such a
you.
blast chatting with you.
This was so much fun. It's like always so fun to get to nerd out because not
Yes,
everybody all the time is on that level of nerdiness.
I
So I'm
know.
always happy when
Yeah,
someone is interested. So thank you.
definitely. I like to end each episode on the same question just to have a little bit of fun. Do you have any jokes, popular sayings, tongue twisters, cool slang
Mm.
words, idioms, words of advice, or words of wisdom in Brazilian Portuguese to share with us and to teach us?
Oh my gosh. I think one that is like I've used a lot that's easy and I guess is commonly used is valeu, which
Valeu.
is like you would say it's like valeu a pena. You would say it like it means literally like it was worth the while.
Oh,
And people say it shortened to just valeu, like I guess it's kind of slang
mm-hmm.
and it's just kind of like something to say at like a closing greeting or like kind of like a goodbye in a slang way. And
Yeah,
it's kind of like
valeu.
saying, thanks or like see like but it has that meaning of like it was worth it.
Yeah,
So
valeu.
I think that was cool and like I like the way it sounds. I like saying it. It's easy and
Yeah. It make you sound like a local, maybe.
yeah,
If you
yeah. It makes me feel like I'm in the know and like I'm cool
I've been here
with
before.
Brazilians. Like I know what I'm talking about. I know your language.
Exactly. It reminds me of like in Spain, um, Spanish, the word vale that they use.
Oh,
And
yeah,
I
that's
don't I
interesting.
don't think it means the same. Well, I don't know if it means the same thing, but I just remember hearing like vale, vale, vale at the end of all these sentences. And
Yes, yeah, I
yeah,
have heard that a lot too.
it's kind of like, yeah,
And they'll repeat it like that. Vale,
yeah,
vale,
vale,
vale.
vale. I love it. I love that word so much.
Yeah, it's like sometimes certain things you just like how it feels when you say it.
Hmm. Yeah. So we've got valeo,
Valeu.
valeo, valeo. That's the word that we learned in this podcast, and hopefully others. But it's always just fun to to end on a fun word.
Yeah, I like that. That's a cool way to finish.
So before I let you go, in and this you might have already answered this, so just let me know. But um, in this situation, after you've been talking to someone for quite some time, and you've been having a fun conversation. You've been having a few caipirinhas. You've got Beth Carvalho playing on the stereo. But one of you's got to go home, and it's time for you to part ways. What is the best way in Brazilian Portuguese to say goodbye?
Oh, I guess ciao with a double kiss.
That works. I love it. It works in every language. Awesome. Well, ciao and double kiss to you,
Double.
Leticia. Thank you so much again, and I'll be talking to you soon.
Thank you. It was great. Thanks so much for having me.
Bye.
Bye.
New episodes of Speaking Tongues are available every Monday, 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to like and share episodes with other language lovers like ourselves. Até mais!